Water pollution types. This video will cover the major water pollution categories, sources of water pollution, as well as the effects. Remember, there are some benefits to having a video lecture like this that I think you should take advantage of. You can pause and rewind as much as you'd like. This means that if the lecture is going too fast and you don't understand something, you can easily pause it and write down questions for me to answer in class. In fact, I highly suggest it in order to ensure that you truly understand the topic. This is the small beginning of Chapter 19. We'll finish 19 throughout the week. Water pollution can be defined as any chemical, biological, or physical change in water quality that has a harmful effect on living organisms or makes the water unsuitable for desired uses. If you think back to the salinization lab we completed this week, and you consider the definition of water pollution that I just gave you, you will come to realize that even things that seem completely natural in waterways, such as salt, can actually be deemed pollutants as well. Our lab focused on the effects of saltwater intrusion as well as salt buildup in agriculture. While the field itself isn't considered a waterway, the stream, river, or lake that the runoff from this land leads to is. The major locations in which we see concerns with water pollution are in streams and lakes, the ocean, groundwater, and drinking water. There are two major types of pollution sources: point and non-point sources. Point sources can be found in areas where pollution can be traced back to its original source. Examples include factories, sewage treatment plants, mines, oil wells, and oil tankers. Non-point sources occur in areas where the pollution cannot be tracked back to one definite source. Either the source cannot be found, or there could potentially be many sources between which you cannot pinpoint it down. Examples include acid deposition, both dry and wet, substances picked up in runoff, and seepage into groundwater. Agriculture is considered the largest source of water pollution in the U.S., mainly in the form of runoff, so it is still considered a non-point source in most situations. The major categories of water pollutants I will discuss today are disease-causing agents, such as pathogens, oxygen-demanding agents, such as organic waste and manure, water-soluble inorganic chemicals, such as acids and toxic metals, inorganic plant nutrients, such as nitrogen and phosphorus-based nutrients, organic chemicals, such as oils, pesticides, and detergents, sediment or suspended materials, such as erosion and soil, water-soluble radioactive isotopes, such as radon and uranium, and finally, heat, which is emitted from electric and nuclear power plants. We'll start with disease-causing agents. Examples include bacteria, such as E. coli, viruses, protozoa, and parasitic worms. These all originate from human and animal waste and generally indicate that there is a sewage issue nearby. These agents generally cause digestive tract issues. Along with the disease-causing agents, we see oxygen-demanding agents. These are not the viruses and bacteria that come with human and animal waste, but the waste itself. Organic waste is broken down by the decomposers in the bottom of a waterway. This is a natural process that cycles nutrients in the ecosystem. However, adding in more waste starts to cause problems in the ecosystem. The health of a waterway can be determined by what is called the biological oxygen demand, or BOD. This is when oxygen is removed from water when organic matter is consumed by bacteria. Remember, decomposition requires a lot of oxygen input. If the oxygen demand of a waterway increases drastically, then the ecosystem is not considered healthy due to an excess of waste material. Sources of this organic matter include natural inputs, such as bogs, swamps, leaf fall, and vegetation, human inputs, such as pulp and paper mills, meat packaging plants, food processing plants, and wastewater treatment plants, and non-point sources, such as runoff from urban areas, agricultural areas, and feedlots. As we would expect, when the increase of decomposition occurs, the oxygen levels of the waterway plunge, and as a result, many fish die in the waterway. Again, waterways naturally break down these wastes as part of the biogeochemical cycles. However, it can be a big problem when the amount of waste input exceeds the amount of waste the waterway can naturally break down. Notice in the graph that BOD and dissolved oxygen are inversely related. Over time, since streams are flowing waters, the pollutants will be dispersed and diluted, so downstream from a point source of this pollution, we expect to see a drop in BOD and a spike back up in dissolved oxygen. Next, we have water-soluble inorganic chemicals such as acids. The major source of acids in waterways is from the burning of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels release sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides into the atmosphere. We can have acidic air if there are acidic gases and particles in the atmosphere. This mainly leads to respiratory problems. These particles can also act as condensation nuclei on which water droplets and eventually clouds form. These clouds release acid rain and snow, and if found at the surface, can create an acid fog. Average rain has a pH of 5.5, so any rainfall that measures lower than that is considered to be acidic. How does this impact wildlife? Most young are sensitive to changes in environmental conditions than adults. This is because their bodies are still developing and may not be able to withstand a drastic change in their environment. Starting around a pH of 5, we start to see that most fish eggs will not hatch. As we get a little lower, adult fish are negatively impacted, and eventually there are places in which the pH is so low that there are no fish in the local lakes. Other pollutants that can come from the burning of fossil fuels are water-soluble inorganic chemicals such as toxic metals. These metals can also come from natural sources. Most metals that are the products of burning fossil fuels are extremely toxic. They absorb really well into plant and animal tissue, which means that they are not easily released from the body as waste. They build up over time in a process known as bioaccumulation. They can combine with biomolecules such as protein and nucleic acids to make long-term or fatal damage. Examples of these metals include lead and mercury. This is the reason there is such a big scare behind pregnant women eating certain fish. These metals build up to high concentrations. We've talked about plant nutrients in waterways before, but I'm going to bring it up again. This is another example of a natural thing being considered a pollutant in excess. These excess plant nutrients are typically brought in as runoff from agricultural areas as well as from people's lawns. Any kind of soil erosion will bring in plant nutrients. This excess of plant nutrients results in eutrophication. Remember, this is considered to be the natural aging of a lake. Over time, the erosion of sediment from the surrounding area builds up in the lake. The excess plant nutrients create an algal bloom. The algal bloom becomes so thick that anything below it dies from a lack of sunlight. These dead organisms sink down to the bottom of a lake where they are decomposed. Oxygen levels plummet as decomposition rates rise. This kills all organisms in the lake. Algal blooms also have a tendency to release toxins that kill fish. This natural process is exaggerated when humans add excess nutrients. When this occurs, it is called cultural eutrophication. Our next category is organic chemicals such as oils, pesticides, and detergents. These are all fat-soluble molecules that build up in the fatty tissues of organisms. The concentration of contaminants increases as you go up the food chain through a process known as biomagnification. The best example we have of this is DDT, or dichloryl diphenyl trichloroethane, a pesticide used in the 70s on crops. It led to the decimation of many higher-order birds in the food chain as the pesticide accumulated in high rates in their fatty tissue. While most of these chemicals are taken up into the body rather quickly, they can still be naturally broken down over time. These chemicals can be broken down into different categories: degradable, photodegradable, and biodegradable. Degradable materials can be broken down chemically, photodegradable materials can be broken down by sunlight, and biodegradable chemicals can be broken down by bacteria or other decomposers. Sources of these chemicals include runoff and household cleaners. They can cause cancers, nervous system disorders, and reproductive disorders in humans. The most common source of natural water pollution is sediment or suspended material. It creates what is called turbidity in the water, or kicked up sediment. This suffocates aquatic life from sunlight and can also build up in the gills of fish. When sediment runs off into a waterway, any pollutants found in the soil travel along with it. The scariest sounding category of water pollution is water-soluble radioactive isotopes, such as radon and uranium, but thankfully they're not found in high concentrations. The main occurrences of these are human-caused. We mine for these isotopes and then use them in power plants. If there is ever a leak of any sort, then it will make its way to local waterways. They can be found naturally in soils, but the main reason they infiltrate waterways is because of acidic soils, the result of acid rain caused by the burning of fossil fuels. These acidic soils help leach these isotopes out. They can cause genetic mutations, birth defects, and cancers. The last category of water pollution is heat. We've talked about power plants using water as a coolant and releasing it back into a waterway. This is still considered a form of pollution. Even small changes of water temperature can affect aquatic ecosystems. Warmer waters do not hold dissolved oxygen as well. If an organism can survive the drastic change in temperature, then it generally can't survive the drastic change in dissolved oxygen that follows. Most organisms go into what is called thermal shock and have trouble coming back from it.
Don't forget to write down any questions you have to ask Miss Joyce in class. Also, don't forget your water samples for water quality testing this week.